This is your go-to podcast for the breaking news across the NFL, while breaking down how this might affect your fantasy team's success. Are you ready to be a champ? Then welcome to Fields of Fantasy.
How's it going, everybody? It is your boy, Jonny B, and welcome back to DFS with Fields of Fantasy, our weekly episode where we look into the Redzone slate for some DFS action over on Fanteam. Of course, before we get into any of that, make sure you are 18 plus, gambleaware.org, and when the fun stops, stop. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Nathan Dowie. How are you, mate? And how was your week 10 in Sunday Redzone DFS action?
Yeah, it was a bad week. I had a lot of Darnold stacks, and as we know, his points were terrible. So I didn't do very well. But last week in the £2 league, I think you might know this man, Sir Dudley.
Do I know it?
Dudley from Harry Potter, isn't it? He got 100. He got 170 points and scored 300. He got £310 in the £12.
Nice.
Pay to be a winner, got 161 points and took home £972. And in the £75 league, Papa Dop 75 got 153 points, got £788, and there was only about 30 people in that. So
nice.
That's nice.
So the big question: would the person who had the team in the £2, would they have won it this week in the £12 at all?
They would have won the £12 and they would have won the £75.
There you go. That's why. I learned my lesson this week. It pays to put the same teams in across both if you're going to win.
Week, didn't you?
Well, I was 11th in the £2. Took home £51. Nice return on £2. And if I played that team in because I didn't play it in the £12, if I played that in the £12, I would have been 7th and would have been a nice 3-figure sum. So it could have been a better week, but I don't hate it. It's nice to be 11th. And what was interesting was what teams did well last week, because of the price of CMC being 4 million. He was in a lot of teams. I don't think he was in as many as people expected, to be fair.
I think he was 53% owned, weren't he?
Yeah, it was slightly higher in one, depending on what league you were, and slightly lower in the other competitions. But my best team was a non-CMC team, and I think that was generally due to the fact the stud wide receivers, so the more expensive options, all of them none of them went off. Most of them were in the teens for points. So then it was when you were finding people like Pickens who scored 20, and then some of the other options. I mean, if you had MVS last week as well.
Did you see that one in the Fanteam group chat on Twitter?
Yeah, he called it, didn't he?
He called MVS at the start.
Yeah.
And you know what? I didn't hate it, but I just wasn't confident in it.
Yeah.
And because I had a lot of CMC lineups, I had a lot of money to spend. So I did kind of stack with studs.
That's it. And that's what the CMC mentality had, because you could afford to just have studs everywhere else. But actually, it almost pained you in the end. And I worked out the optimal team price, and you would have had change on your money for the optimal team last week because of some of the cheaper guys being the high scorers on the slate. And I think even at tight end, because of Hawkinson's price, he scored a little bit less than Kelsey, but you would have had him in the optimal team because of his price. So it was a very interesting week, and it's going to be interesting again and see if there's any other bargains we can have this week.
I think he was the only one I actually hit on last week was Hawkinson at his price.
Hawkinson was very good. And he was only 10% owned in the £2, which was, I think was mad.
I just had a lot of where even when I spent good money on players, if they performed, they didn't outpay the price. They might have got 16, 17 points.
Yeah.
Lots of that across the board.
Yeah, you need a couple of those bigger ones. I mean, I think Brian Robinson, you had him in your team. He was probably the stud running back to have. A lot of the stud running backs failed to score big points as well. So let's see if we can have another successful week for myself and hopefully a better week for you, Dowie. We always go position by position. And we're going to start off at quarterback for week 11. Who are you picking?
So I'm going with Goff, 16.4 million. Now, two things happened last week. Goff was horrendous. He had 5 interceptions.
Yep.
And the Jags D kept the Vikings at bay. Now, Jags have only 2 teams have allowed more points to quarterbacks than the Jags, and they kept Darnold at bay. I know that I had so many Darnolds at shares. I don't see it this week. I think the Lions are one of the best offenses in the NFL. I would even argue they're one of the best teams in the NFL now. They probably are number 1 in the NFC. I don't think Goff has a bad week this week. I think he learns from it. And I do really like the matchup for the Lions. I think they'll put up a lot of points.
Yeah, I think there's potential for that. I mean, the Jags have been pretty terrible most of the season until this Vikings game last week. And I think the combination of them against the Vikings, as you say, Goff having a turgid week last week, could put a lot of people off Goff, even if he's quite cheap compared to a lot of the other quarterbacks. So I like him as a bit of a differential pick away from some of the other obvious type of quarterbacks that people are going to pick. In terms of what quarterbacks I like, I did struggle to decide if I liked any of the expensive ones. I think Josh Allen will do well. I think he generally turns up in Buffalo KC games. And I expect him and Mahomes to have a bit of a battle all game long. And you do tend to see in the Buffalo KC games, both of them, not just Allen, seem to use their legs as much as they normally would, if not more. So I think there's points on the ground as well for Allen, as always. What I am looking at though is Bo Nix. He is actually a lot more expensive than he has been. He's the 4th most expensive quarterback on the slate, but I do believe against Atlanta it is a defense we can target. They have an average of 20.7 points to quarterbacks per game, and I think I like Bo Nix and I like Denver, and I think this is a game where, especially, I believe Kirk Cousins is a maybe at the moment. If they struggle because he's not playing, it allow Bo Nix to be on the field a bit more than the Falcons offense and have more opportunity to score points. So I like him as well. I also like Russell Wilson as a player having some lineups, because I do believe this could be a game where, even though Dowie was saying to me earlier this week, it's one of the games, the Baltimore Pittsburgh game being one of the highest scoring in terms of how Vegas see it being. But I actually think this is a potential game which could completely underperform that. However, I think I do want to have some leverage against that thought process. So the way I want to leverage that is not necessarily Jackson, because I do believe Pittsburgh defense can hold him back a bit, but actually Russell Wilson, because we've seen all season long that Baltimore defense is absolutely terrible, particularly against the passing game. They've had well over 3,000 passing yards against them so far this season, which I believe is way above anyone else. So I do believe it is one you could definitely target, especially with how they've played. And I think there's obviously some decent stacking with Wilson as well, if you like that.
Yeah, I quite like the Wilson show. Josh Allen and Mahomes, I would pick either one, to be honest. I see that being a high scoring shootout. I don't really like Lamar just because I like Pittsburgh defense.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy, I think, has a good game, but I think he's probably a bit priced high. I don't think you're going to get your money back. I think he scores good points. I just don't think you see your money. Bo Nix is still a little bit expensive for me. I think apart from Goff, I do like Tua. It was between Tua and Goff for me. Raiders defense is terrible, and I actually think them two can outpay the price quite well. I don't like Geno at his price, so Geno's too expensive.
No, I think there's some that can be quite expensive. It sort of seems to be a level where they don't really want to go too below on quarterbacks on Fanteam. and it makes a lot of the cheaper options a little bit more of a scary prospect on getting a nice 25-point type return, I think, and which is what you need when you're, even if you're at 16 million, you need to be close to 25 million to pay it off. So, yeah, I think Gino in particular at 16.7 is quite expensive against San Fran, but you
What do
never know,
we
do
know?
you?
What do
What
we
do
know?
we know? Right. Should we move on to running backs?
Yes. Now I'm going to save the players and the listeners a bit of money on this pick. Nick Chubb, 7.9 million. Extremely cheap. Now, I've been looking at his, the box score last few weeks,
Yeah.
and the volume's high for Chubb. He's getting the volume. He's had another week off. They've just come off the bye week, so he's going to be a week rested. They're playing the Saints, who have allowed the third most points to running backs. And I also think Winston against his old club, who they dropped, is going to want to be putting points up. And I think Chubb will be an integral part of that offense. So do I think he's a top 5 running back this week? Probably not, but at 7.9 million, I think he's that cheap plug-in player who will outpay his price and allow you to get the studs in.
Yeah, I like that. Saints have conceded 12 touchdowns against the running game. Compare that to the passing game, it's a lot less. And yeah, at that price, it is hard to look away from Chubb, I think. He's probably the cheap option on this slate. If I was going to go away from Chubb, I have to say I do like the idea of going against the Buffalo defense. It is schemed to let you run at them, really. And that's been seen all throughout the season so far, throughout the first 10 weeks. And I do not expect that to stop. And I think Hunt has been a bit of a fantasy revelation this season. He's been pretty good at KC, and he's had 4 weeks out of the last 6 where he scored 18 plus. And I think he has the capability of getting towards a 20-point week plus against Buffalo. Who else do I like? I mean, I do like Acham against Vegas. I think he is always going to be a good shout. I mean, running backs against Vegas as well is always a good shout, but I think Acham in particular, we're seeing him where Mostert is becoming less of a threat to his workload, and he is getting almost the full majority of the workload at Miami. And I just think at 18 million, I think he can be one of those that can hit you 25 plus this week. Who else do I like? CMC.
Yeah, I was
He's
just
still only 16 points. Again, Seattle are a team that concedes 18 plus points again on average to running backs. So I would, I think at 16 million, I'm still wanting to have shares in CMC. I don't think I'm going to have as many as I did last week, but I do want to have some shares and hopefully get paid off by his price at the moment, which I think we all expect that to be closer to the 20s as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think this is the last week you see him not in the top 3 most expensive running backs.
Yeah, I think so. And, he's down as a maybe at the moment, but from what I've read and heard, it's mainly to manage his workload. And that is why he's limited in practice, not because he's injured or anything, that just because they want to manage him and get him, through the season without getting another horrible injury that's going to have him out for a load of time. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I think it's expected that he will definitely play and get a nice amount of workload against Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. I like CMC. And I think Kareem Hunt actually, he's like, you could put him in every week, I think how that cheap offense, he's always gonna pay his price off.
He is. He's getting a bit more expensive now. He's 17.7. He's in that Williams and Taylor JT type pricing. So it's getting more expensive, but I think he has been worth it in a number of weeks this season. And I do believe he's worth having in some of your lineups when he's playing Buffalo. It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah. Shall we move
Wide receiver then?
Receiver?
Yeah.
So with a Goff quarterback, you would say St. Brown would be the stack. And I think St. Brown has a good week, but I believe my main wide receiver I'm going to make sure is in every team is Tyreek Hill, 14.7 million. Now, we know it's been his worst year this year, but he's playing against a slow and poor Raiders defense and speed kills, and we know we two are back. Their offense has looked better, hasn't it? And I think it's one of them games you see him go closer to 200 yards, to be honest. So yeah, I think Tyreek Hill will be wide receiver 1 this week, and I think he's extremely undervalued in this matchup. Do you think to that?
Interesting.
I think
It's interesting.
14.7's low.
I think it's cheap for him. Do I like the matchup? Maybe. Raiders have done all right against wide receivers in general. They've only conceded 15.4 points per game, but I do believe we're due a Hill game where he just balls out surely soon. I can't believe we're going to say this every single week he's on the slate until the end of the season, that he's so cheap and he's going to ball out at some point, and he never does. So, I think he's always wise to have him in some of your lineups. I don't think I'm going to have him in all of them though, but I think it's a wise thing to have him in some lineups this week.
You know what's an incredible thing? I'm just looking at it. Jacoby Myers is more expensive than Tyreek Hill.
That's a madness, isn't it?
That's just ridiculous.
I mean, Jacoby Myers is the sixth most expensive wide receiver on the slate. It is a weird slate this week. I think because of the results last week and how the wide receivers performed, in particular Jefferson and St. Brown, it's brought some of the pricing down slightly, hasn't it? We don't have CD Lamb either, that's been towards the 20 million. But it doesn't seem to be as an expensive slate this week on wide receivers. But I have made some picks. I like to try and stack my wide receivers where I can with a quarterback. That's why I like the idea of Sutton if I'm going Bo Nix. And Pickens did me well last week, so why would I not then go against that Baltimore defense and go with him in a Russell Wilson stack in some of my lineups this week too? And to be honest, if I don't have Russell Wilson, he'll be in some of my other lineups as well. But one person I think is extremely cheap on this slate, and I think could get ignored, is good old Puka Pies, Pack in a Cower. I think at 13.5 million, it's an absolute steal for a guy that has only played 2 full games this season, and he scored 18 plus on both. The other 2 games he's played, he didn't play much of the snap percentages because he was injured. So it just seems a no-brainer. And I know New England haven't been the worst as a defense, but Puka is the type of player who performs against whatever defense. And I just struggle to see a situation where it's not worth having him in your team at that price, because he needs to get towards 20 points rather than some of the other guys getting towards 25 to 30 points. So for me, he's extremely cheap, and I cannot see, like Hill, him staying at that price all for the rest of the season. Him probably more than Hill at that price, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of I think I see Hill going up a couple of mil. I think Puka's very cheap.
His pricing is based on his form of 11.8 points on average for the 4 games he's played. But that is taking into account 2 games where he did not play the whole game because he was injured. And it just brings that form points down for the season. And that's why his price is so cheap. But the actual 2 games he actually has played the whole game, he's well outperformed it. And as I say, I just think it's a no-brainer. It's a low risk pick at his price.
For sure. Shall we go to tight end?
Let's.
So, I really like this. Laporta, 10.8 million. Is the 11th most expensive tight end. Now, I think that's extremely good value for him. He's been very boom or bust this year. But as I really like the Lions, I think he's a good cheap stack with Goff. And I think he has a potential with how bad Jag's secondary is. He could be a top 3 tight end this week. So you're getting him at 11th most expensive. So I think there's extremely good value there. I think he could be the slate breaker.
I think we've all been waiting for him to have a good week, haven't we? He had that against Houston last week at 17 points. And he could easily do that again against the Jags. So I'd say I don't hate that at all at 10 million. I think he's a lot cheaper than a lot of what you say with the stud tight ends this week.
Well, yeah, Kittle's 19.3, Kelsey's 17.3, Bowers is 16.7. So it's between 9 and 6 million you're saving.
Exactly. And I think this is a type of week where that saving might come in handy. And the pricing in tight ends have definitely got a lot more expensive throughout the season.
Since
so
National Tight Ends weekend when they all got them tight ends, the prices have just been...
Feels like it.
It's too much of a volatile position to spend high money, isn't it?
I think it is. And, Kelsey's been quite consistent, hasn't he?
I think Kelsey's been pretty
the
good.
last 5-6 games.
And it's
he didn't
a
start
good matchup as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you expect he always turns up in a Buffalo game. He just, you notice it, and then you've got Kittle. He is a maybe at the moment, but if we get towards 20 points, and I'm thinking, will he score close to 30 in that San Francisco Seattle game? The odds on that are probably lower than Laporta scoring 16 points. So that is the method to your madness on why you'd be picking Laporta in a lot of your lineups. But see, I'm looking at tight ends as well that aren't that expensive. I've got two. One I think is completely obvious because of last week, Hawkinson. I think it's now slightly more expensive than he was, but he's still not that expensive as he should be. Hawkinson is, in my opinion, the fourth best tight end on the slate. And I think he's in terms of fantasy and the position he's in and the teams he's in, but he's still currently down the bottom end of the first page for tight ends. And he more than paid off his price last week. And even if he scores last week's points, he'll more than pay off 9.2 million. And he's playing Tennessee and they are turgid. But here's a little cheap one that I think, if it goes well, could be a slate breaker as well because of the price. 6.4 million, Dawson Knox. Now, you might be thinking, really? Dalton Kincaid is trending. Really? Dalton Kincaid is currently trending towards not playing on Sunday.
Ooh.
Our wide receivers, how many of them are trending to play this Sunday? KC, in terms of tight ends, are one of the worst teams against tight ends. And they concede the second most points per game to tight ends compared to anybody else. So the right matchup as well. And he is a reliable target if they need it. And without Kincaid there, and without some of the other potential wide receivers there, I do think it's not someone I'm going to have in loads of lineups, but I think he's someone I'm going to have in some lineups where I can take a bit of a risk with him because he's cheap. And if he does come off, he could be the type of player that actually unlocks the rest of my team and is one of those ones that are going to push me quite high in the leaderboard because I don't think many people will be looking at Dawson Knox.
I wouldn't say there'd be much more than a 5% ownership. I guess the problem you will have with Knox is people will be looking at the injuries and stuff. If Kincaid's out and a few wide receivers, you'll have the people on the ball, won't you? Who will throw him in a couple of lineups, but he won't be heavily owned. And I think it's them type of picks what win you. Same win you the money, just a bit like MVS last week.
Absolutely.
Their reasoning was very similar to yours with Knox.
Yeah, and I think you look at some of the other injuries we've got, in particular in wide receivers at the Bills. Yes, we're playing the Chiefs, right? But it makes more sense from a Bills point of view because of how our record is at the moment. What is the point in risking them against the Chiefs? We then have to bye the next week. Would you let everybody get fit again for week 13?
I would, because your division's trash in a way, isn't it?
Exactly. So for me, if there's a lot of people out, there's opportunity for him anyway.
Right, DSTs.
Let's do it. Who's your DST this week?
Miami Dolphins, 6.3 million. I'm targeting Minshew. The Raiders' offense could be the worst in the NFL. We can't run the ball. We can't throw the ball. Now, the only thing I would say is we've got a new offensive coordinator, haven't we?
Yeah.
Now, we don't know what it's going to look like. Is it going to be one of them? Are they going to save the offense? Or is it just going to be trash as it has been all season? So I probably will go Dolphins in every team, to be honest, just because 6.3 million, I think it's a no-brainer. But
yeah.
You know what? Will the offense be better with a new offensive coordinator? We can't say until we've seen it. It can't be any worse. So
No.
we will see on that front. But Minshew hasn't been good, and you've got to target these quarterbacks, haven't you? And not doing good.
I think you have.
Young looks okay now, doesn't he?
He's looked better than.
He's looked better than Minshew.
Yeah, and I don't think he. I think there's multiple quarterbacks that I prefer targeting over Bryce Young now, which is something we wouldn't have thought at the start of the season because that's pretty much who we were targeting every single week.
Yeah, look, I said, I don't think he's good still, but I think he's okay. He's not someone to target. And with Carolina, they've got a decent run game. Chuba Hubbard's, I think, been a very good running back this season.
Absolutely.
And they got Jonathan Brooks coming back now as well, the first
Yeah.
draft pick. So, but look, you look at Raiders. Look, I don't think we've had a game where a running back's run over 100 yards all season. I'd hate to tell you how many games we've had over 50 yards running.
Been absolutely turgid to watch the Raiders.
And now you got no Devontae Adams. You know, Jacoby Myers, I do really like. Brock Bowers has been good. Trey Tucker's okay on the occasion. So we will see, but as it stands, and I wouldn't be shocked if I'm wrong because sometimes new offensive coordinator freshens things up.
Yeah.
So
it would be interesting.
I just think that price Dolphins are the best value in defense.
I think they're up there for sure, and I think the offensive coordinator thing is probably why I wouldn't have him in all my lineups like yourself. But I'm going to have some Dolphin shares because I do think there's other options on this slate. Absolutely, I think the best two defenses on the slate are the Lions and the Rams in terms of fantasy, but the Rams price at 9.5 puts me off a bit. But I do like the Lions price at 7 million. It's only 700k more than the Finns. And I do believe the Lions is a better defense. And I do believe out the two defense, who's the most likely team to be able to take takeaways and take it down to the down into the end zone from a takeaway. I do back the Lions on that one.
I wouldn't argue that. And also,
so at
Mac
7
Jones is at quarterback again.
Exactly, but
yeah, that could be.
I think at 7 million they're very cheap, and I also think on the slate, even cheaper than the Dolphins. What have you thought about Aaron Rodgers and his passing? From what I've been watching, it's been absolutely awful. I think he gets some to Wilson, but there's some which are so far away from the wide receiver. Like, is it the time for him to retire? Probably. And I do think the Colts themselves are a defense that could also, against that Jets offense with Aaron Rodgers throwing interceptions, I can see that they can potentially also have some opportunity to get DST touchdowns. Yeah. And at 6.1 million again, it's another cheap one. I think it's another week where there's plenty of options, 7 million and under, against actual matchups that are probably good for those DSTs. So then why would you decide to go and spend more money when you don't really need to?
Yeah, I must admit you sold me on the Lions now, actually. I don't think I'll go with the Colts just because I think the Lions and the Dolphins are just too good value. I don't think these savings are gonna outweigh the points personally.
Probably not. But
so I think I probably will now when I said I'll have Dolphins in every lineup. I will throw in a few Lions.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I mean, last week my best defense was probably the Bills when I spent more money, but I don't normally spend money on DSTs. But if I did this week, it'd be the Rams. But do I want to spend 9 million, nine and a half million?
I don't think you need to.
I don't think you need to. I think with DSTs you can take punts on cheaper ones
Yeah.
because one of them will have a good week, most likely. So take punts on the ones you think are more likely to.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think we've picked a few good value players this week where you're going to get studs in again. I've just
Yeah.
actually done a team and my wide receivers, honestly, you would cream yourself thinking you could get all these players in your team.
Will they actually perform this week
Well,
rather than
that's
and like
that,
yeah,
that's the issue, but I will tell you I've got Hill in it,
yeah,
Jefferson in it,
yeah,
St. Brown in it,
yeah.
and Cup.
Okay. So
I I won't say the rest of my team, but
no.
I've afforded to fit all of them in.
Okay. Interesting. Would you not like to upgrade elsewhere and swap Cup out for the cow?
Um, you know what? I'm not confident in my team. I don't think I need to.
Fair play. Fair play. Well, we'll see if it goes well
I
in
think
the
I'm gonna win.
slate this week.
And people need to know Fanteam have upped their prices this week.
They have what have they upped them to?
So there's more guaranteed money in the pot. So in the £2 competition, 4 grand guaranteed.
Nice.
£12 competition, 10 grand guaranteed.
Jeez.
And I think what is it in the £75? Is it 2 or 3 grand guaranteed? I don't know. I can't afford to go in that competition, so I don't pay as much.
I don't know, but that what is they haven't just moved it because they've actually moved it above what it's achieved actually the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely a week to get involved, guys, because that is very, very good.
Christmas is coming.
Exactly. So
Take our advice and win your Christmas money.
this time next week, it's almost a month till Christmas, so you need that spending money, guys. So get involved while you can, and it's 2 grand in the £75 one this week. So I
And
think
remember,
if
these prices can go up depending on entries, but this is
yeah,
guaranteed.
that it is. Well, that has been all of our picks this week. A quick shout out to our sponsors, the JTT Cup. Links are always in the description, and the 2025 JTT Cup Best Ball competition can be signed up now, and you can also donate now and help the Joshua Talent Trust in helping in some lives of some children who unfortunately have had brain tumors and helping their families too. So what a better time to help out than a month or so before Christmas, and spread some of that Christmas joy. That has been us this week, and we'll see you next week for week 12, and hopefully we get some nice wins with these increased guaranteed prize pools. See you later.